Final part of our show today, Brian, is our defensive look at the film and upon further review, I guess the best way to put it. And then, of course, our key moments in the game. And we've got a few here, obviously, to talk about. Let's kick this thing off, Brian. Talk about the run defense a little bit more specifically than we did earlier on in the show. So, your thoughts on the run defense and kind of what you saw when you look back at the film.
So my grade doesn't change, and my opinion of the run defense didn't change in this game. It wasn't good enough. I didn't think it was good enough. The D tackles weren't good enough. The linebacker play is ascending, but it's still not there yet. But there was also, Vince, a lot of, I think Notre Dame was okay with some of that. And I kind of get it, because their thought process is exactly what we laid out. They are not good enough to beat you running the football. They are good enough to beat you getting, 15 going and getting that big outside guy going, and Brett Gabbert gets hot.
Yeah.
So like, okay, we're going to kind of give you some of those soft bubbles and say, we dare you to run the ball, because you may get 5-6 yards here, but you know what you're not going to do? You're not going to rip off a 50-yard touchdown run.
Right.
Or like your receivers are capable of doing and have shown that they can do against Power 5 teams. And so to a degree, some of that was given. Now, there were mistakes within that you clean. Like there was a play they ran an outside zone and just sealed off the inside. They got cracked and nobody filled the crack, and they run outside for an easy 20-yard outside zone play. Like that can't happen. Like you got to fit better there, linebacker. You got to fit better there, defensive end. And so there are some mistakes like that need to get cleaned up. But as you watch it, Vince, I think they were kind of like, look, we're kind of okay with that, because the flip side is what other teams did. Other teams were like, hey, we're going to shut down the run game, and then they went out and got passed on a whole lot. Personally, I think you're good enough in the secondary that you could have still done both. But, I mean, if you're going to play cover 2, you're willing to kind of give up a little bit in the run game, because your safeties aren't triggering like they are in other games, right? That's the reality of it. So when you break the game plan down, I think that Notre Dame I think they're okay. They were okay with some, like the 4, 5, 6, 7 yarders. I think they were okay with some of that. The 20-yarder, that was a mistake. There was a play where, and I'll get into the motion, but they ran a motion, and the way that Notre Dame ran the motion, you knew the cutback was going to open up, and just some different things like that I looked at and said, hey, look, I think they were kind of okay with it. They were okay with some of it. I think they were okay giving up 90 to 100 yards, and they weren't concerned about holding them to 30 like they'd had in the first 2 games. So not saying I agree or disagree. I'm just saying, like, that's the reality of what I think the game plan was. And at the end of the day, Vince, it worked, because, yeah, you gave up more rushing yards than they average, but you also held them to way fewer passing yards than they average, because your game plan was, we're not going to let them throw the football on us.
You take away what they're best at.
Right. We know that that's the only chance they have of beating us. And so when you look at, for example, the Notre Dame run game, they came in averaging, 32 yards a game, and you gave up 110. So you gave up, 78 yards, right? Am I doing that right? Am I doing the math right? 110 minus 32, 78. Yeah. So you gave up 78 more yards than they came in averaging. But if you look at the pass game, they came in averaging 291.5, and you held them to 119. So you gave up 70 extra rushing yards to counter that with giving up, 172 less passing yards, because you took away a lot of that deep ball stuff by playing some cover 2 and doing some different things there. So I just think, game plan wise, I still didn't like how the run defense played. I still don't like how the D tackles played. It doesn't change any of that. There's still some fits that needed to be better, but you're like, okay, I think they were okay giving up some of that. Does that make sense, Vince? Like, I'm not saying they were okay giving up that 20-yard outside zone run. I think Al Golden's probably pissed about that play. It's more of some of those, 4 or 5 yarders where, hey, you want to run a little quick off tackle play, and Jack Kaiser hits you and you fall down for 4.5 yard gain. All right, cool. Take that. Because you know what you didn't do on that play? You didn't throw the ball down the field to Cole McDonald. You didn't throw the ball downfield to Reggie Virgil. You know what I mean? Like, sure, Okay, we'll take that. I mean, there's some of the reasons that Brett Gabbert was able to kind of run and scramble was because they weren't worried about spying on him. Because if Brett Gabbert's scrambling for 8 yards, you know what he's not doing? Throwing the ball down the field to his receivers. So against certain teams, you live with that. And would you do that if you're playing Riley Leonard? No, because once he gets into space, he can do some, right? But against Brett Gabbert, he's not going to hurt you there. He's going to pick up the first down and slide, but he's not scoring. And so I think to a degree, some of that they were okay with. And that's why the end result, if you take out, I'm frustrated with the rushing yards, and you just look at the end result, they held this team way below their season average, over 100 yards below their season average, because they said, we're going to make sure you don't do what you do best. And if you're going to beat us, you're not going to beat us with the second best thing you do. Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame doing what they do best. And so in this game, Notre Dame said, that's not going to happen to us against Miami of Ohio. And it worked. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Vince, but that was it was very clear, and nothing makes that more hammers that home than the fact that they played as much cover 2 as they did. Because cover 2 is a pass defense. It's not a run support defense. That's why I loved Mark Schlereth's response to Mel Kiper. NFL needs to ban cover or make safeties play closer in this cover 2. And Mark Schlereth was like, you want to stop teams from cover 2? Run the football. And that's football 101, brother. I mean, that's been true since we were kids. You know what I mean?
It's so stupid that he wants to ban a defense, but whatever. That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
For
but I thought that was I mean, it was very clear that Notre Dame was like, we dare you to run the ball because you're not going to beat us running the ball. And they weren't. They were not going to beat Notre Dame running the football.
No, gosh, no. And at the end of the day, you look at the 110 yards of rushing, you're like, that's not good enough. But then when you look at the big picture like that, and it's like, okay, they kind of allowed. They kind of did it on Notre Dame's terms, I guess is the best way to put it. And there's certain things that I think they still could have cleaned up in the run game defensively and maybe not given up quite as many yards. But I do understand where you're coming from. And now that you can see it when you watch the All-22, let's just put it that way. Mm-hmm. It made sense why they did what they did. Yep. So there you go. Next point we want to bring up defensively is kind of some of the, and we've seen this a couple of weeks in a row now, in my opinion, some issues with motions and shifts. Actually, we've seen it against MAC teams.
2 of the last 3 games.
Yeah, that's right.
Because Miami of Ohio actually watched Northern Illinois film and said, hey, that worked. Let's do that.
We can do
Purdue
that
was
too.
Like, no, we're Purdue. Let's just keep doing what we do.
Right.
Nope. I thought, that happened. That reared its ugly head a little bit in this game as well, Vince, in my opinion.
And they took advantage of it. Miami of Ohio took advantage of it to a degree. There was a sequence early on in the game, and I didn't mean to step on you there, Brian. There was
that's what a conversation about. I don't know why you guys continue to do this. Nobody on the planet cuts people off more during these shows than me. So when you do it to me, you don't have to apologize.
That's great.
We're having a conversation.
I got you.
Just roll with it, brother.
All right, here we go. So there was a sequence early on in the game where they were taking their running back and they were motioning him out to be a wide receiver. Okay.
Yep.
This is the
second play of the game. Are you talking the first drive?
Yes, it's the first drive.
So set the scene. It's the second play of the game.
Right. So they motion out the back to the left side, and Notre Dame's response to that is they brought Adon Schuler over to cover the back out of the backfield, right? Well, he comes out very, very high on that. And the first play.
And no urgency getting over there.
He's late, very late. In fact, I feel like, if I remember it right, the line, I think it might have been Kaiser, kind of turned around and is like, you got to go. I remember that right. But anyway, the running back kind of runs a go. They do. I can't even remember what the play was, but it didn't go to the running back, right? I think it was the very next play, if not the 2 plays later.
His very next play, Vince,
very next play.
Same exact formation.
Yes. They motion the back. Same thing. Schuler's late kind of getting over. This time,
no urgency.
He runs a comeback, and it's
just like a
wide open.
Right.
It was wide open, easy pitch and catch, and they gain a bunch of yards. I think it was a first down, to be honest with you.
It was a first down. I think they got 12 on the play. I'm looking at here. It was is that the first quarter? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a 2nd and 3 play. They threw it incomplete. It's 9 yards. So it's 3rd and 3. It's 3rd down, and that got the chains moving.
But they got plenty for the first down. I mean, the pitch and catch was one of the easiest throws that you're going to make, because Notre Dame hasn't done well moving with the offense in pre-snap. And that one stood out to me. I mean, that was such an obvious mishandling of a back just lining up out as a wide receiver. I mean, it was a very simple motion. It wasn't anything that they haven't seen before. And I have no problem with Don Schuler being the guy to cover him, but you got to do it faster, and you can't stay that high on him.
That urgency
especially
that we
in
talk
that
about,
moment.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's that urgency we talk about. And it's like, that's one of those things where it's like, they'd never done this. We hadn't seen it on film before. It was like, look, guys, you got to kind of have a plan for that. Exactly. Like, hey, a team motioning a back out of the backfield is not like rocket science. It's like, it's not that, you've got to have a plan for that. And they didn't. And there were some other things they did. They ran a stack motion with a post-snap switch, and then a Don Schuler in the corner kind of run into each other because they clearly weren't prepared for that. And it got the guy open for a nice gain, move the chains. One of their better runs, inside zone runs of the day, is when they go in motion and they motion to a 3-by-1. The Mike linebacker bumps over like a stack, and the wheel goes out, and it just opens up an inside zone cutback lane, like just easy open cutback lane and there was nobody to fill. There just were some things where Miami was able to probe Notre Dame a little bit to get a couple plays, and it had no impact on the game. And from the standpoint of, it wasn't something like it was going to cost them a game, because they're not quite as creative as Northern Illinois was with it, and they couldn't really generate any big plays with it. But there were some things where they would go in motion and send Cade McDonald across, and then that, the safeties are going over, and Notre Dame is like rolling their safeties, and this guy's coming down, and then you've got to chase Cade McDonald. And they couldn't get to him. So, I mean, it resulted in a couple good plays. It's more so like you've got to find some answers, because when you play a team that's got better talent than Miami of Ohio, it can create some problems. So I was a little frustrated that part hadn't been adjusted. You hadn't found it, because here's the deal. A good coach, and Al Golden is a good coach, and so I don't think this is going to continue to be a problem. It shouldn't anyway. You start to say, okay, we've picked up on some things the teams are doing to us, because they know they just can't line up and beat us. They got to do some stuff to generate. So I was told this story about Harry Heastan. He would go into games against some certain teams, and he would just start throwing blitzes at his team and looks and fronts that they never faced before, or that team had never shown on film. Because his thing was, I'm going to make sure that my guys are prepared, because I know that team knows that they just can't line up and do what they do against us. They're going to have to do something different. So I'm going to do some things to put my guys in some stressful situations to make sure they're prepared for it. I told you a story about how a head coach I worked for, Joe Fincham, we're getting ready to play. Actually, your son has taken a visit to this school, who the head coach is now at a Division I school. Gotcha. And he says, he's like, Brian, I just want you to, because normally I'd have to watch film as the GA and break down film and run their blitzes and stuff. He's like, I just want you to throw whatever you want at us this week. And so I'm like making blitzes up to the point where he's like, okay, that's enough. We're good. But his point was, if we can pick up all this crazy stuff, then there's nothing that they're going to throw at us that we can't handle. And at some point in time, Coach Golden's like, okay, this is what teams are going to do. They're going to do some of these funky things to try to create some looks to get guys in positive matchups. We have to have a plan for it, even if it's not necessarily something that we've seen on film. And if that team doesn't go to that, and they just think that they can run their base offense against us, then, we'll be ready to celebrate another victory in the locker room. You know what I mean? And so that's something they're going to prepare for. And once again, that was something that the very little success that Miami, Ohio had, a good chunk of that came on stuff like this. And Notre Dame's going to have a plan. And it also speaks to how dumb Purdue was for not, like every coach. You look, it's not about, let's do what Northern Illinois did, but it's like, hey, this gives Notre Dame problems. We need to figure out within what we do offensively how to take advantage of that. And Miami, Ohio I'll say this about Miami of Ohio. That is a very well-coached football team. Very well-coached football team. And Chuck Martin called a very good game. He just doesn't have the horses. He doesn't. And that was the problem. But coaching-wise, they did some very good things. Very good things. Right.
Agreed. Let's talk about something a little bit more positive when it comes to the defense. And not that we weren't being we were being negative or anything, but man, these
Well, I
young
mean,
kids.
the whole keys to victory. I mean, we were pretty positive during a lot
Oh,
of that.
for sure.
Yeah.
I was being more sarcastic than
Yeah.
anything else. But the young guys on this defense, Brian, I mean, they're making plays now,
Oh,
but
man.
I can only imagine what this is going to look like in a couple, even next year, later on this year, but in a couple
Yeah.
years. Holy cow. Holy cow.
Well, you went into this game, Vince, and you're like, okay, Pateljo's out. He'd been your best defensive end, maybe your best defensive lineman so far in the season prior to his injury. You're not playing Josh Burnham again because of an ankle injury. He was probably your second best defensive lineman through the first 2 games when he got hurt. And you're like, all right, what are they going to do? Boubacar steps up and just dominates. Junior Chialamaka had, without question, the best game of his Notre Dame career. Like, you saw the Mike linebacker instincts in this game. And, like, a perfect example. So you talk about big moments, Vince. The biggest moment of the game happened because of a couple younger guys, a true sophomore and a redshirt sophomore. First one of the game is that Christian Gray interception. Great recognition by Christian Gray, drives through 2 DBs and breaks up the pass. Like, that's not supposed to happen on that route. And Drake Bowen does a nice job of kind of getting out and forcing the quarterback to kind of throw wider than maybe he would have liked. He couldn't lead him the way he wanted to. But then on that same play, they dropped Junior Chialamaka instead of rushing him because they were in a true 3-by-1, like with nobody close. It's the running backs in an even alignment to the right. That is we're throwing the ball, everyone, at the 5-yard line. It's a very clear passing situation. So Al Golden calls for Junior to drop. And so Junior takes 2 steps back, and his Mike linebacker instincts kicked in. Because remember, Junior came to Notre Dame as a Mike. He looks over, he sees the ball. What do linebackers get taught to do? Follow the ball. You see the ball in the air, go to the ball. So Junior sees the throw. He starts taking off to the ball. Christian breaks it up. Junior's there to come over. If he's A, pass rushing, or B, does what most DNs do and just watches the ball, he's not there to pick it off. And then you see it like later in the game, you see Boubacar making huge plays. Like, they get that first down that you talked about, right? Where they motion the back out, can move the chains. What killed that drive? Very next play, Boubacar has a great pass rush, knocks the ball out, forces a fumble, minus 14 yards, drive over. You know what I mean? Christian Gray picks off a pass later in the game. Madon Schuler has the really bad penalty, but he also, and we just critiqued him for the not getting over thing, but he also made a lot of plays, getting over top of cover 2, breaking passes up. I thought this was Drake Bowen's best game of the season. I mean, Drake shut down their last chance to score by himself, basically.
Yes.
So it was second down.
2 consecutive plays.
I loved this play on 2nd and 10. So Drake is to the right of the defense, right? And the tight end's to his side. They run a bootleg where the tight end works underneath, and he's going to go to the left side of the defense. And as soon as the ball is snapped, you see Drake go like this, Vince. No. He points to the tight end. And he's like, tight end. And he's like, okay, I'm going. They try to sneak that under route, and as soon as the ball gets there, Drake hits him, knocks the ball out.
And it ends up being incomplete. But even if he catches it, it's like for a
1-yard gain.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's minimal.
Next play, Drake runs an inside twist, just bursts free, drills the quarterback in the backfield. Now it's 3rd and forever. I think they did they try to kick a field goal, and then Bryce Young blocks it. A true freshman blocks it.
Yeah.
And you're just like, man, the young talent in this team is nuts.
Yes.
And then Benjamin Morrison. So, by the way, I'm told Benjamin Morrison's fine. It's just he came out after. So he was in there in the first series of the third quarter.
Right.
The next series was Leonard's series. So they had Leonard and Christian in. Christian picks the guy off. And then Notre Dame offense, I think that was when they went down and scored to make it 21-3. After Christian's interception, Notre Dame responded by going down and scoring. It's 21-3, and it's like, okay, we don't need to put Benjamin back out there. So let Leonard Moore playing. Guess what? Leonard Moore looked pretty flipping good.
Yeah.
Later in the game, Carson Hobbs almost intercepts a pass later in the game, and you're just like, they got some dudes. You know, Kingston's Kingston. You know what I mean? And
he's just playing.
Yes. And you're watching, like, Boubacar's a NFL player. You know, Adon's an NFL player. Christian's an NFL player. Drake Bowen's an NFL player. Kingston's an NFL player. You're watching these young players, and you're like, dude, they're going to be all right. Bryce Young's an NFL player. Like, when I mean, I don't mean like right now. I mean, like, they are the talent that when their careers are over, they're going to be playing in the National Football League.
Right.
And you're just like, boy, this is a young group, but man, they're super talented. But not only that, Vince, but they had to step up on Saturday because you didn't have Jordan Patojo. Boubacar had to step up. Like we always say this, like, yeah, it's easy to be the guy when you're not the guy. You know what I mean? Meaning, like, it's easy to come off the bench for your 10 to 15 snaps a game and do your thing. There's no pressure on you. But in this game, like Boubacar, you're a true sophomore. You hardly played at all last year. You've played a decent amount your first 3 games, but you're still a young pup. Missed almost all your senior year. Hey, bro, we need you to step up and be a playmaker. So what does Boubacar say? Got you, coach. I'm going to dominate Miami of Ohio. And guess what he did? It's exactly what he did, Vince. I mean, PFF had him credited for 3 pressures. I'm like, there's no way he only had 3 pressures. I can think of 5 off the top of my head. And Junior Telemaka, all of last year, Vince, do you remember? We talked about this. Do you remember how many? Junior Telemaka was the number. He was like 2A and 2B. Him and Josh Burnham last year were 2A and 2B at Viper. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do you know how many? Do you remember any pressures that Junior Telemaka had last year, like the whole season? Do you know how many total pressures he had all of last season?
Well, it wasn't many because we talked about that position not having a bunch.
No,
So
it was 4.
Okay.
He had 4 pressures the entire season. He had 2 run stops the entire season. On Saturday in 1 game, Junior had 2 pressures. They were legit pressures as well. He had a run stuff, and he's a redshirt sophomore, and he had an interception, and then he had a great read on a play where they tried to free release a back. He reads it perfectly, plays it, and blows the guy up. And you're just like, okay, Junior has – there have been games this year, Vince, where Junior did not play a snap on defense. Matter of fact, Junior didn't play a snap on defense in the first 2 games. And the only reason he played 18 snaps against Purdue last week is because Jordan Patojo got hurt.
Because of the injury, yeah.
He wouldn't have played until they were blowing him out had it not been hurt. So Junior's out of the mix at Viper. Got beat out by Boubacar. He's not playing a lick. He could have this is bull crap. I didn't come all the way from California to sit the bench. This is Bush League. I'm in my feels right now, and I'm mad about this. No, Junior said, I'm going to keep working. And when my number's called, I'm going to step in and play. And this is a bit of an unsung part of Saturday's game. It was true with Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler. They could have been in their feelings after getting beat out. They were starters last year. And they could have been in there. But you know what? When their number was called, they were ready to go. When Boubacar's number was called, he was ready to go. Junior Tillamook had every reason in the world to not be locked in. Now, I'm not saying he should have been. I'm just saying as teenagers, that's kind of where we are when things aren't going our way. Junior stayed locked in. And how do I know he stayed locked in? Because he doesn't play like he did on Saturday if he had mailed it in the first 3 weeks. He doesn't. He did some nice things against Purdue last week. He doesn't do that if he's not locked in. And he comes out on Saturday. And I wrote this in a breakdown, Vince, because we talked about how bad the Viper production was. You just mentioned it. We talked about that this season.
Sure did.
So Boubacar and Junior Chalamaka, who were the 1 and 2 Vipers in this game, finished. And I'm going to go down here. I got the numbers here. It was in my. They finished with 7 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, an interception, and 5 total quarterback pressures. That is big time. And they had to replace your best defensive lineman through 3 games.
Up to this point, yeah.
And they stepped up and said, okay, Jordan's been good. We're going to raise you and play even better.
Sure.
And that was a big part of what I was excited about from this game.
And those kids are going to be huge on Saturday too. Like they need to continue to be those kinds of players. Now, I'm not asking for the exact same kind of production. It's a different opponent. I get that, but they need to be as effective as they were this past week, going into next week and beyond. Obviously, it can't just be a one-hit wonder. You know what I mean? They've got to continue
because you're playing a weak opponent. And
sure,
right,
sure. We need to see it again.
But that was huge, Vince. But when you watch this game on Saturday and you think of the number of young players that stepped up, either freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores, or redshirt sophomores that made a big impact in this game. And you start to say, like, yeah, you know, I'm a little frustrated with this team right now, but man, I mean, Boubacar Traore led you in tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He's a true sophomore. You know, Drake Bowen had a pretty good game. His best game so far, 4 tackles, a sack, a tackle for loss. You know, you look at Don Schuler had 3 tackles and 2 pass breakups in the game. He's a true sophomore. Christian Gray had a huge game. Leonard Moore had a really good game. Junior Tamaka's 2 tackles, a tackle for loss, an interception. He's a redshirt sophomore. Jaden Osbury played well in the game. He's a true redshirt freshman. Donovan Heinisch is a redshirt sophomore. Bryce Young made a lot of mental mistakes, but man, he played hard, and he is super athletic. And he's going to benefit from playing a game like Saturday where he did make a lot of mistakes, because now there's film that Bryce can look at and say, okay, this is what you got to clean up. Kingston is a dude. There's a ton of young talent. And this is why I say this defense, I don't know if they've peaked yet, because one of my takeaways was the linebackers still need a lot of work. But you know what? They're getting better and better and better and better. Every week, I feel like the linebackers play better every week than they did the previous week. Every week. And like this defense, that's why I say this defense, as good as it is so far, this defense can and should play a lot better. That's, but I'm okay when the sophomores make mistakes. What I'm tired of is when the veteran returning starters are not doing anything. But they played a little better on Saturday, and I hope that is the thing that springboards them. And here's my hope is, well, we'll talk about that when we preview Louisville, but you watch this young talent, Vince, and when you break down the film, you're like, man, there's so much young talent on this football team, especially on defense, where it's like, and they're not just young and they're good players, but you're talking like that's a future pro right there.
Yeah,
like, that's a dude.
Right.
That's the kind of dude. And that's why I say Notre Dame is making mistakes on defense right now, but their teams aren't able to expose them for it because
talent.
Christian Gray, that was not a good coverage by him. He got beat off the line on his interception, but he's so good that he can kind of recover and still find the ball and make that play. Most corners, when they get beat off the line, they're in, oh gosh, I got to catch up. And then running through the guy and cut PI. Christian was like, I'm good. I'm running right with this guy. Oh, let me find the ball, pick. And you're just like, okay, that's a different cat right there. You watch Boubacar Traore, and I mean, he's still got a lot of work he needs technically, but you're just like, they can't block that kid. Right. He's just too talented for them to block. He's too long, he's too athletic, he's too powerful. They just have no answers. Now, some teams down the road will have some offensive tackles that can go toe to toe with him, and he's going to have to improve his technique. But boy, y'all now see why I had him number one on my upside grade for that defense coming out of high school. Right. The fact he was so raw, which is why he ranked low. It's also why he didn't play a whole lot last year. But now you're seeing the light go on, and you're like, yeah, that's the guy we hoped that we were getting when we broke down film on him. It's a lot of talent there, man. So that was my final takeaway, Vince. I don't know if you had some other things that you wanted to get into in that particular instance as well. I think there was we had talked about some of the big moments of the game, which we kind of got into a little bit, the key moments.
I think we
talked about the junior tackle for loss. We talked about the first INT. The second red zone stop, I thought, obviously they made a mistake of trying to go at Benjamin twice, but Jordan Clark made a really nice read on a pivot. They tried to run a pivot route. They were trying to get Jordan to overplay so a pivot route is like you start to go like you're going to run like a crosser, and you try to get the DB to bite on the cross to beat you to the spot, because that's what DBs are taught. Crossing route, beat him to the spot. And then you pivot, work outside, and that guy overplayed, and now I'm wide open. They tried to do that in space on second down, and Jordan Clark played it perfectly. Hey, you're at the 12-yard line. I'm not going to overplay this crossing route. My alignment has me prepared to play your cross. Guy pivoted. Jordan was all over him. He catches it, I think, for like a 4-yard gain, and Jordan brings him down. In space, really good play. And then, of course, they try to, hey, that didn't work. Let's throw a fade route against Benjamin Morrison again. I know it didn't work last time, but maybe it'll work this time.
Played it beautifully. I mean,
he played the first one pretty well. He played the second one even better.
Textbook.
And I was like, yeah, you may not want to do that again.
Right.
And I don't think they did. So, yeah, I thought that was a key moment, too, because, again, it was nothing. And this is their second time they had gotten inside the 10-yard line, Vince.
Mm-hmm.
And, look, their red zone defense last year was a huge part of that defense's success. Notre Dame had allowed 6 scores on 6 red zone trips so far this season. Now, only 2 touchdown drives, but they held them to 1 score on 3 drives. You had the interception on drive 1. You held them to a field goal on that particular drive. And on the third drive, the third red zone drive is what we broke down earlier. That was the drive where Drake Bowen had the 2 back-to-back huge plays.
Blocked it.
and that put them way back. They were at the 17, I think, is what they got to. And then Drake had I think it was a -12 loss. So now they're kicking a long 40-yarder that Bryce Young blocks. It's like that's what we saw last year from this red zone defense. And so that was a big part of this game too. Because if you're not good in the red zone in this game, this is a little bit of a different score, Vince. Yeah. We may be talking like it being 21-13 or maybe 13-7. So I thought that sequence of events forcing that field goal was huge because your offense hadn't really gotten going yet. And your defense kind of held them down until the offense finally figured it out. And that was kind of my big moments. It was those two red zone drives were the big moments of this game.
Yeah, the red zone is key for this defense. And remember, 2 years ago, they were awful in the red zone. Remember that? I mean, they were just
and that's great between this 20s. Year, right? Would they be good? Would they? What was going to be the true Notre Dame defense?
Exactly.
And honestly, so far, what we had seen so far was sort of a middle of the two, but leaning closer to last year. Good in the red zone, but not as dominant as last year in the red zone overall. But their red zone touchdown defense had been pretty good, only 2 out of 6. And then one of them they gave up was to A&M, and A&M had to really work for that one. If you remember that one touchdown drive, they had to work. It was not an easy red zone drive for them. And of course, this game they shut them down. So so now teams have had 9 red zone trips this season against Notre Dame, and they've only come away with 2 touchdowns. Like, okay, so yeah, they're pretty much so far back to where they were last year, and that's a good sign. Because you weren't when we got 2 years of when you have 2 years of evidence and they're just polar opposites, you're like, oh, okay, what's the real Notre Dame defense? Mm-hmm. And so far we're seeing like it's in the ballpark of this one. So that's my stance. That's my thoughts on that one.
I know we've that's going to do it for our defensive breakdown, but we do have some super chats that we need to get to, I believe. Yep. So let's make sure we get to those before we sign off for the evening for a little Irish breakdown after dark. So why don't you throw those up, Brian? Let's have at it. Patrick McGrain, thank you so much for the super chat. How would we all feel about this game if the score had been 38-13? Same 25-point win, just more scoring.
I don't really look at it as the scoring, Patrick. It's how you got there, right? And if they got to 38 for some of the similar reasons and they played the same way, I'd be frustrated. Having said that, let's say, Vince, that they kick that field goal when it's 28-3, and then they get a late touchdown in the number 2 defense, and Notre Dame scored 38 points because Riley hits a couple of those quick throws early and he doesn't fumble the ball, and I'd feel a lot better about it. So it's not the 25-point win that bothered me. It was the missed opportunities that led to you only scoring 28 points in this game, right? So I understand the point you're making, Patrick. But I'll say this, that's my answer. I do think if Notre Dame would have scored 38 points in this game and won 38-13, and they scored 38 points because Riley Leonard played better in this, I think most people would be happy. So again, I want to give some of I was very frustrated with the fan base on Saturday, to be honest with you. You'd have thought that they lost the game, but at the same time, I do understand. I do think a lot of people in good faith were, hey, I'm glad we won, kind of. But I was not happy with what I saw, and that's fair. So I don't know that it was the 25-point win. It was the way that they won 25, which is just a lot of sloppy play. 38-13 probably wouldn't have been as sloppy, if I'm being honest. So I don't think that people would have felt the same way. I probably would have, because it wasn't about the 25-point result. It was about the fact that I probably still would have said you should have scored 2 more touchdowns. That's probably what I said. I don't know what's your thoughts on that, Vince?
I mean, people would have been happier, I think, because
a lot,
because that means the offense probably did some different things and maybe were a little bit more successful.
Probably hit a couple of those throws.
Yep,
right.
Exactly. So I think people would have thought differently. Maybe I think I don't think we would have broken down the film any differently, Brian. I don't know that it would have been a whole lot different on our end, and frankly, I wouldn't have been happy that the defense gave up 13. Maybe in your scenario where they gave up a score there, at
against
the end,
this late in the game against
twos, and maybe Notre Dame doesn't block that field goal that gets them to 13, right? So
yeah, and that's what I was thinking. Like it was 28-3. They blocked that field goal, right? Wasn't it? I think it was 28-3, or was it 21-3?
I think it might have been 21.
Okay, so that would have made it like 21-6. Okay, and
then a
let me
late
see
score.
here. So yeah, so Notre Dame is 21-3, fourth quarter. Let's see here. They had that long drive. Yeah, I mean it was 21-3, and then Notre Dame went right down the field and scored to make it 28-3. So it's been 21-6. Let's say at the time they already had 31. You block that, you go down and get 38, and then they get the ball back with 5:30 left. You put your backups in, and they go down and score. Okay, whatever.
Right.
But if they'd have scored 13 points on the starting defense, I'd have been a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, and exactly. That would have made.
We'd be having a different conversation, but I'd be less worried because defense just wasn't locked in against a bad team. We know that. You know what I mean? That's probably
right. Michael S., thanks for the super chat. Just watched the game for the first time. Not as bad as the supposed from the critics. Definitely Leonard over Angeli. No debate there.
Agree. I love this one from Iden. It's just hilarious.
Iden Benami, thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it. You don't need to watch IB Nation all the time. LOL. Wife just now. Got to multitask, baby. LOL. What's wrong with getting J Love more rock? Let's go. Riley Leonard.
The game plan was designed to try to get Jeremiah Love the ball more on Saturday. It's just their game plan was to take it away, which is why Riley Leonard had 143, yards rushing, because they said, hey, we're going to try to shut down number 4 and 24, which is probably a smart game plan. But,
right.
Notre Dame only ran, 65 plays on offense, and 5 or 6 of them were from the second team. Jeremiah Love had 11 carries. They threw him a tunnel screen. He had another catch in the game for 9 yards. He had 12 touches. Jadarian Price had 6 touches, and he averaged a whole yard more per carry. Defense was trying to do certain things to take him out of the game. And so Notre Dame said, okay, we're going to take advantage of that, and our quarterback's going to rip you up. So, and the other thing too is, I understand y'all want to see more Jeremiah Love. I get it. But he still is a true sophomore who is still 210 pounds, has still get some more armor on that body. And you're still in a position at 3-1 to make a run and make a deep run in the playoff. I want Jeremiah Love fresh in November. I care more about him being able to get 20 touches in a much needed win at USC than I do about him getting 20 touches against Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
Not Northern Illinois, against Miami of Ohio, or Purdue. Yeah. You know what I mean? He's doing his thing now. He's getting comfortable. He's getting going. And then there's going to be games down the road where you've got to ramp him up and Jadarian up to win the game. And you know what? Notre Dame did that in the opener. They had to get him the rock more and Jadarian the rock more, and they did. And they did their thing. So I'm just there's no need to force that issue right now, in my opinion. In November, you will. He's getting plenty of touches, and he's going to get more and more and more. But again, I know you guys love Jeremiah Love for good reason. He's a freak.
He's awesome.
But number 24 is pretty flipping good too. And through 4 games, number 24 is actually averaging more yards per carry than number 11, or number 4 is, which is kind of nuts, Vince, when you consider that as I say that, here's the part that makes me laugh. It's I'm sitting here talking about how hey guys, Jadarian Price is averaging more yards per carry, and he had a 37-yard run called back from a penalty, but it's 0.05. You know what I mean? It's not Jadarian should be 1A running back because he's 0.05 yards. No, I'm not saying that. I'm comfortable with the roles they have now. The point is they can both tote the rock. So let them both tote the rock. And then when we get into November and hopefully into December and January, they don't have those 50, 60, 70 extra carries on their shoulders. They're more fresh. And good luck stopping these kids when your defense is a step slower because it's late in the year, and they're fresh because Notre Dame is using them appropriately early. That's my standpoint. You got 2 dudes, use them and keep them both fresh, because you're going to need them. If this team is going to be the team we hope it is, Vince, it can't be that without 4 and 24 both being healthy and dominating. Can't. You need them both. I'm not wearing Jeremiah down because, okay, you give him, he goes out and runs 20 times for 150 yards against Northern Illinois, but by the time you get to November, he's banged up. Miami, Ohio. Who cares if he had 150 yards against Miami, Ohio?
Doesn't matter.
I want him to be fresh enough to do that against USC.
Correct.
That's where I'm at. And he will. I sure hope so. My favorite part of the weekend is people say, you can't beat the best teams in the schedule
Yeah.
without a better passing offense. And I'm like, you didn't look at the box score of the USC Michigan game, did you?
32 yards, dude. 32.
Michigan beat USC with their quarterback going 7 of 12 for 32 yards. This is why Sharon Moore should have listened to me a month ago when I said they need to put Alex Orji in the game and go full 2017 Notre Dame on teams. And that's what they did to USC, and it worked pretty well. But yeah, guess what? In college football, outside of Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, there's a lot of teams you can beat the way Notre Dame's playing it right now. That's not a justification or an excuse because I don't want them to just beat USC. Notre Dame's beat USC a lot the last 10 years. I want them to beat Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, Texas, those teams. And in order to do that, the pass game definitely has to get better.
Right.
But when you've got a quarterback that can do what Riley Leonard's doing, where, you're going to beat a lot of teams.
Yeah.
It just may not always be pretty. That's
right.
Like this is Brandon Wimbush. If Brandon Wimbush would have gone 16 of 25 in games, Notre Dame wouldn't have lost a game. If Brandon Wimbush would have gone 16 to 25 for 150 yards in games, they wouldn't have lost a game. Because Riley's not running behind Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey and Alex Bars. Can you imagine the kind of rushing attack Notre Dame would have right now with him at quarterback and what they're doing if he was running behind? If that was the line that Notre Dame had, think about that. Come on. Be crazy.
Oh, go back to that one.
Oh, sorry. Let's answer this one first, and then I'll go back and find that one.
Okay, sounds good.
We didn't answer the question. I'm sorry about that.
No, we didn't, but that's okay. It's the one about offensive line, just in case you didn't.
Go ahead. I'm looking for it.
All right.
Yeah, I'll bring it back up.
Yep. Andy Milton fan, thanks for the super chat. Could Onye play big end? Seems too good not to play. I feel like he's not getting enough playing time in the middle, but I don't know about moving positions.
Yeah, let me look at the snap. I don't know that playing him at defensive end is really the answer unless you're playing a team like let's just say this. Let's say Notre Dame was playing Michigan. Okay. What we saw Saturday, that version of Michigan, where it's 220-pound Alex Orji who can't throw a lick, and you've got Khalil Mullins at running back who's 220, and you got Don. And guys, we know they're not throwing the ball. We need to get beef on the field. Yeah, okay. Yeah. You want to kick him out the big end? All right, cool. Fine. But if you're playing a team that's going to throw the football, I would have not even dreamed of playing Jason Onye defensive end against Miami of Ohio, because you need somebody who can rush the quarterback.
Right.
And that's rushing the quarterback from the edge is not his strength. So I would not have done that, Vince. I would not have done that. So I'm going to keep looking for that other question. Do you remember what the question was, Vince?
Yes, it was during the bye. I can't remember who sent it. It might have been Michael S. But it basically said, during the bye week, do you give Tosh Baker and Sullivan Absher a shot at left tackle? Thanks for the thoughts.
I would.
Something along those lines.
Unless Anthony doesn't improve. If Anthony improves this weekend, then okay, cool. He took a step and he's doing better, and you try and go win with that. But if he doesn't get better, then you're going to have to consider that. And now keep in mind, part of the issue was that Tosh wasn't even healthy the last 2 weeks. So here it is from Raymond. There it is.
Oh, you found it. That was from Raymond. Yeah. Sorry about that. Sorry, Raymond. I was trying to use the old noggin here, and it didn't work out for me. It says, do you think it's time during the bye week to maybe let Tosh or Sully get a chance at left tackle? Thanks.
Yeah, I'd work him in. I would also consider, I mean, just right now, I would move Gerby Lambert over there just to get some reps in certain situations and see how he handles it. See how well he plays left-handed. Because that's it is so obvious. He's so obviously their most physically talented offensive tackle. He's just very raw right now. But you watch him on Saturday events, and he still doesn't necessarily know what he's doing, and he's moving people. And he did the same thing against Purdue. He's extremely gifted. I would give all three of those guys a chance in that. Yes, 100%. Absolutely. And I'd even consider no, you know what? I wouldn't do that. I thought I was going to say I'd consider moving Emil Wagner over there and then maybe letting Gerby come in. But like Emil's playing well. Don't
Yeah, I
mess
wouldn't
with
mess
that.
with that.
You know what I
No,
mean? Like
yeah, completely.
again, that was my first thought, but I was like, nah, I don't know
That's
that I want
something
to
you
do
do in
that.
the off season, not during the bye week.
Yeah,
If that's something, you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like if that's
Because
what you're
now,
trying to do. Yeah,
maybe you're better there, but you're not as good at right tackle, So it's like, look, Emil's starting to get comfortable. Don't screw with that. Yeah,
right.
you're right. You're right. And I knew Vince was going to say that, so it was in my head before I even
Yeah, don't do that.
did it.
Shiver me fingers. Thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it very much. Nothing to do with the game, but what's the deal the last several years with not wearing their knee pads over their knees? It's just asking for trouble.
Well, number one, I've always thought knee pads only really prevent you from getting bruises. They don't
True.
protect you from any major
Yeah,
knee
no,
injury.
not from like ligaments or anything
Yeah,
like that. That's what knee
yeah,
braces are for.
yeah.
Yeah,
What
not knee
I think
pads.
I think for me, it's when you are running and your knee hits a guy's helmet, they can provide some protection there from getting a bruise. I always thought the rule was like, I remember when I played in college, like they would walk around and make sure because
Oh,
I hated having knee
100%.
pads over my knees, hated them. So I would always try to cheat and get them up a little bit above my knees, always did. And because I didn't like having that, I wanted my knees,
Yeah, so you can
uh,
move around.
yeah. And you'd have refs walking around, hey, put your knee pads down. Apparently they don't, because like Riley Leonard's got them suckers like 6 inches above his kneecaps.
Oh, no, listen, we went on a
Christian
college
Gray's
visit.
like, I'll just say this, Vince. Notre Dame's DBs are basically wearing Thursday shells. I mean, that's
Correct.
basically what they're wearing in games.
Yes. We like I said, we went to a college visit on Saturday before the Notre Dame game, and the kicker, for example, had pants that went halfway between his hip and his knee, and that was it. Like half of his
And
half
that's a
of his
game.
upper
That's a
lip.
pant. Not even
Yes.
practice. It's game pants.
No, that was this game look. Okay, college coaches our college referees are just not doing that anymore. High school still does. Not that long. My last year coaching, we got a 15-yard penalty because at the beginning of the game, the referee asked the head coach, "Is your team legally and properly, prepared or whatever?" And you always say yes. But then, a couple of guys were trying to hike up their knee pads, or they cut the knee pads as small as possible, and they make them about this big. You know what I mean? And a kid had his knee pads up, 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. That's what I mean. Assigned to the bench. You get 2 of those, you get kicked out as the head coach, right? So they still do it in high school, but clearly in college, that is not a thing.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Definitely not.
Not a thing. And it's not in the NFL either. I mean,
No.
both levels. They just
I don't know about that one. I don't watch that one.
Right. Well, they just don't. Mike Nolan, thanks for the super chat. Appreciate you very much. Why is it seemingly every time there's a ball on the ground, Notre Dame never seems to fall on it? Assume just the way the ball bounces, but still upset.
Well, I mean, they did recover one on Saturday. Emil Wagner fell on one, which was a huge moment because I still believe if they would have, like they ruled it, he had broke the plane. But if they would have been able to review that, I think they would have been
not.
like, he didn't.
He definitely did not.
Yeah, like it wasn't even close. But Notre Dame has 4 forced fumbles, and they have recovered none of them.
Right.
So, yeah.
True.
And see here, fumbles lost. See, Notre Dame is fumbles. Let's see where they are. They fumbled the ball 4 times and only recovered. So the ball's been on the ground 8 times this year, and Notre Dame's only recovered 2 of them. And they didn't count the one on Saturday, so it'd be 9 times, and they've recovered 3 of them. It's not a good rate. I don't know if it's like, hey, you're doing a good job in practice of working on forcing the ball out, but maybe you're not doing enough to work on recovering the fumble, falling on it properly. Could be it. Some of the times it's just the way the ball bounces, but yeah, you'd like to see, because they had that issue last year, Vince. They had a very high forced fumble rate last year, but not a very high fumble recovery rate last year. So, because what was Notre Dame last year in fumbles forced was tied for second in college football at 18. And if you look at where they were in fumbles recovered last season, they had 8. So, yeah, and that's 18 forced fumbles. There's other fumbles that happen that aren't forced. And I think Notre Dame had 6. So, like, pitching the ball, dropped dropped muff snap. That's not a forced fumble, you know. And so there were 6 of those. You had 24 fumbles last year in some capacity, and you recovered 8 of them. A third. Same rate they're on this year, a third. So, yeah, you'd like to see it get better. Last one, Vince.
Relic you, thanks for the super chat. Are we seeing true RPOs or options? Sometimes it feels like the decision was made before they even lined up.
Well, sometimes it's going to look like that. Really cute. First of all, to answer your question, yes, they're seeing a lot of true RPOs, and we saw them last week. This is why you need to be on the board, because I broke down the pass game video and I showed you 3 total examples of true RPO plays that they ran.
Yep.
One was a side adjust to Jaden Thomas. One was the touchdown pass from Steve Angeli to Cooper Flanagan, and then another one was Riley Leonard on an under screen to Eli Raritan. Yesterday, we saw a couple true RPOs. One of them, for example, they actually hit a glance route to Bo Collins in the second half. Did you see that, Vince? And then the backside slant to Jaden Thomas is also there. Now, sometimes an RPO is you ride it and then pull and throw, like Steve Angeli's was that. It was a ride. If he comes up, you pull and you throw it. Other RPOs are pre-snap decisions. We have leverage on the bubble screen. I'm catching and throwing. I'm pulling and throwing. There's no fake. So sometimes it's going to look like that, where the running backs are run action, the line's blocking, but the quarterback pulls and he's throwing that bubble screen. So it looks like, well, they're just doing the run fake for show. And it's actually, no, they're blocking this. The receivers are doing that. And the quarterback, some of the RPO throws are predetermined based on how the defense is lined up. Right.
Right.
Does that kind of explain it properly, Vince?
I think so.
Sometimes it will look like the decision is made before, because it's not made before they line up. No decisions are ever made before they line up, because you can always check out and do all those type of things. But it's more so once they line up, the quarterback makes the read, and then sometimes it's just going to be, I'm pulling the sucker. And sometimes, like, I'm still going to do a flash handoff fake, but it's like there's no way he was actually handing the ball off there. Like, yeah, because he knew in his head he's going to pull it, but he needed at least do that to time the play up because of whatever, and that's why he's doing that. So that's why sometimes it does look like that. But yes, they're definitely doing true RPOs and options in this. So, and there's some others that I'd like to see them do. I think they could get real, especially their 2 running back looks. I think they could get real creative with some of the stuff they're doing. Like, okay, so look, this is who Riley Leonard is. Lean into it. Get even more doing with your RPO game and your screen game and your run game. So those are definitely things that I could see them doing more of, and like to see them do more of, if Riley can't make the necessary improvements in the passing game. That's what I would like to see. So there you go, Vince. That's it, man.
All right. That's going to do it for this edition of Upon Further Review. Thanks for hanging out with us in a little Irish Breakdown After Dark. Appreciate that very, very much. And make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends. And, of course, join the boards.irishbreakdown.com. Going to be some great stuff up on the boards by this time tomorrow. There's going to be some breakdowns of Riley Leonard's throws and some different stuff. So all 22 coming your way, but only if you are a member of the boards. As far as the upcoming schedule, of course, there will not be an afternoon show tomorrow because it gives Brian some time to get that stuff up on the board. But there will be an evening show at 5 o'clock, IB Nation Sports Talk. Sean and I will break down Marcus Freeman's press conference that is earlier on in the afternoon. And then, of course, we will have Rapid Fire. And then it will be back to your regularly scheduled programming Tuesday on, where we turn our attention officially to Louisville. It is Louisville week now, Brian, and we're going to break it all down for you, get you ready for that game. And folks, just a friendly reminder, if you don't have Peacock, you're not watching the game on Saturday. So if you need to sign up and get your 1 free month, now is the time to do that. And hey, you can even watch a couple of the episodes of Waking Up the Echoes or whatever that thing is called, the documentary. Then you can watch the game on Saturday as well.
There's actually some cool movies on Peacock too. I would let y'all borrow it, but I already have one. I'm allowed to let one person watch it, and that's already spoken for. So
this guy right here. I'll be the first one to admit it. Yeah, so make sure you check that out if you want to watch the game on Saturday if you're not going to be in attendance. So without further ado, that's Brian. I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.